Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have 2 elections taking place in about 10 days. Well, as of this weekend, it's going to be 7 days. And it's an interesting process. People have been following this very closely because there is a belief that the results of this election could potentially give us a sense as to what could happen in 2024, which, as you know, there's presidential elections. And of course, there is a lot of interest in trying to understand what the opposition is going to do. Joining us today, once again, is Federico Berrueto, political analyst. He's been joining us throughout the years. Federico, you wrote a really interesting piece about the disarray, I guess that's a good word to use, that the opposition currently finds itself. Can you just kind of walk us through why you say it's in a disarray?
Well, nice to be with you, Ana Maria. Well, the opposition really, when Mexico needs more of the opposition, is a time where the opposition is in a very, very bad shape. And that means that really you can see that in many places of the country, mostly the large cities, there is a lot of people that are looking for a political party, for electoral way, in order to vote for something different from the ruling party. That is to say, the opposition has a great opportunity. However, you cannot see that the political parties from the opposition are doing the best to do that. Political parties in Mexico are very closed within themselves. They are not open to society. And it's incredible that right now, when really you can see that Mexican society is looking for electoral participation, that is to say, to vote for something different from what's going on right now in Mexico with Morena. The political parties from the opposition, they are not doing their best in order to get that support.
I guess what is so frustrating is that the division between the opposition is very public. I mean, the inner fightings within the PAN, within the PRI. Oh my goodness, the PRI, and now we have a Movimiento Ciudadano actually kind of, jumping into the fray with this strategy that they unfolded this week, basically saying that they would never have a coalition with the PRI. I mean, I think they've defined themselves for what they will and will not do in 2024. And they're basically saying we will not agree to go in a coalition with the PRI. And, you can debate how important or not important the PRI is in this coalition, because the PRI is also having a lot of problems. But it just seems that this kind of inner and very public inner fightings is damaging any possibility of a candidate from the opposition winning in 2024, at least for the presidential elections. But how is all of this going to be affecting both the state and local elections?
Well, I have to tell you this, that most observers of the electoral process, they are looking for the presidential election. And I think right now, they have to look at the Congress election. Why? Because the ruling party, the President Lopez Obrador, has put forward, let's say, they are asking for a change, a constitutional change. And for that, they need a lot of seats in the Chamber of Deputies and also in the Senate. And I think that the opposition has to look not only to the presidential election, but also to the Congress election. And also, there are 8 states with a governor election. Of course, that elections are important. But for me, I think that the opposition, they have to sign or agree in a coalition in order to face what is right now the most important issue. That is to say, the change of the Constitution. You may lose the presidential election, but you, as opposition, need to have enough seats in the Congress in order to avoid that the ruling party change the rules of the game, because they are not looking for a minor change. They are not looking for a cosmetic change, but rather a change of regime. And in that respect, I think that the opposition, they have to talk each other very seriously about the election at the Congress level.
Do you, I guess, I think as I listen to you, I think we're assuming that the opposition parties, and when we talk about opposition, we're talking about PRI, PAN, Movimiento Ciudadano, and PRD, because we're still assuming that, for example, the Green Party is more likely than not to go in a coalition with Morena, and maybe we can talk about that in a second, because there's been some interesting discussions taking place this week. But I think we're assuming that these parties understand what you're saying, and that priority should be in trying to at least make sure that the next president of Mexico does not have the power to change the Constitution in a way that could have a long-term impact on the governability and the survival of the institutions. But it doesn't seem that they're not talking about that. I mean, what's interesting about all of this fighting is that they're basically talking about, who's going to be the candidate, how the candidate's going to be selected. And now it seems that there's the fight between, how this coalition, how you're going to select the candidate, but who's going to be part of this coalition. So this sounds like a disaster. Or am I wrong?
Well, it looks like we are facing a disaster, precisely because the political parties are much more concerned about let's say, the elections. Where is the money? Where is the money in the presidential election and also the governor's election? The political parties are not used to look at the Congress election. And right now, I think the most important election is at the level of the Congress. And I hope in the coming days, in the coming weeks, political parties from the opposition are going to think very seriously what is going on right now, because what Presidente Lopez Obrador has said about what is the purpose of the 24 election. Well, Lopez Obrador takes for granted that Morena is going to win the presidential election. But he's not only looking for that, he's looking for a majority. And what worries me is not only that the opposition is not united, perhaps they may go united to the 24 election. The problem is afterwards. And I'm afraid at least the PRI, as you can see right now, but even some votes in the Congress, they vote with Morena. I'm afraid that the PRI, they may go with Morena after the 24 election. And that is a great problem because in that way, Morena can change the constitution regardless of the electoral result.
So this is very interesting. So you think that what could happen is the PRI, or at least those who are elected under the PRI flag, could in fact become another, they can be votes that the Morena will negotiate with, or the president of Morena, or the president who will probably be from Morena, it seems like at this point, will be able to vote or pressure into voting for these constitutional reforms. Now, does that depend on who controls the PRI, or is it just eventually going to depend on the PRI, that a number of candidates be elected under the PRI party that have more, that they have some affiliation with Morena or some interest to be part of this new restructuring of the PRI?
Well, of course, Ana Maria, it depends who controls the PRI. Right now, the PRI is controlled by Alejandro Moreno and Rubén Moreira. Both of them are quite close to Morena. And because they are going to choose the legislative candidates, I think they may have the total control of the deputies and senators after 24 election. So it's not, it's a possible scenario where Morena, they may not get, I have to tell you, it's very difficult that Morena and associates, they may have enough seats in order to change the constitution. What could happen afterwards is that the PRI, they may go with Morena after the 24 election. And of course, Alejandro Moreno, the leader of the PRI right now, and Rubén Moreira, they are quite close to Morena, and that could happen, and that is also a disaster. That is to say, the problem is not only the election, but what comes after the election.
Can you talk about, let's briefly talk about what's happening with the Green Party and with Movimiento Ciudadano, because there's been some interesting statements made. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I'll let you speculate. What do you think? Do you think that the Green is defined as being an ally of Morena for the upcoming elections, or they're going to be kind of selective in what races they are going to be an ally with Morena, and maybe they'll be an ally with, or they may go on their own? I mean, what do you see happening with the Green Party and with Movimiento Ciudadano?
Well, what I can see of Movimiento Ciudadano is that they have the objective of them is to displace the PRI as a third party. And for them, they are focused, the batteries, not against Morena, not against PAN, but against the PRI. Why? Because it's the objective. And what the Movimiento Ciudadano is looking forward is to have enough votes in order to displace the PRI as the third political force. That is the reason why at this moment the struggle, or they are fighting quite hard against the PRI. That's my view of the reason what Movimiento Ciudadano is fighting the PRI. Many people think that is because they are aligned with the Morena. I think it's not the case, but rather Movimiento Ciudadano is looking for, to be the third political force in Mexico's political system.
But in doing that, of course, you know, the arguments from the PAN and the PRI is that in doing that, they're basically, it helps Morena, right? I mean, it's
Well, of course,
yeah, it's and you know, and you can understand them not wanting to have an alliance with both the PRI and the PAN if, you know, their candidates, or at least the future of their party, may not be guaranteed. One last, now this, I promise you, this is the last question. What's going to happen with Marcelo Ebrard as a candidate? It just seems that the president has been quite, I'll use the word snarly towards him, not nasty, but kind of like sending a message like, you know, just accept the results because, and this is my interpretation, you're not going to be the candidate. Am I wrong?
Well, that's my view. I think Marcelo Ebrard is not going to be the candidate. And also, he's going to remain with Morena. He's not going to be a candidate from the Movimiento Ciudadano, the Partido Verde. For those parties, it would be great to have a candidate as Marcelo Ebrard. But I think the whole interest around Marcelo Ebrard, they don't want to lose. And if they play with a small political party, they are going to lose. So they are going to prefer to work with Morena, mostly because they can see that Morena is going to win the 2024 presidential election. So I cannot see Marcelo Ebrard outside from Morena, even though I don't think he's going to be presidential candidate.
Will he accept that?
Yeah, well, of course,
I mean,
right now,
what does he get sticking with the president?
well, I don't think, I cannot see what Marcelo Ebrard could get from the president. I don't think the Senate, the leadership of the Senate is going to be enough for him. But I cannot see what can do because, well, there is no option. And to be outside of Morena, I think for him is to lose everything.
Yeah. Well, things are interesting, and hopefully you'll come back really soon. We'll talk about the results of the elections in the state of Mexico and in Coahuila, and whether, you know, do we now think that the root of the opposition and the future of Mexico is pretty much defined based on those two elections? I don't know. I may be exaggerating, but it's always great to have you on the show. Federico Berrueto, political analyst. He's been joining us throughout the years. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
We're